My game is called The Store is Closed. In the game, you're lost inside an infinite furniture store, and at night, the lights turn off and the staff attack.
Get out now!
To survive, you'll need to break furniture to craft weapons and build a base. During the day, you'll venture into the store, exploring different departments like the show floor, the warehouses, and the cafeterias, each containing unique staff to fight, furniture to break, and loot to collect. As you explore, you'll find underground lab entrances, as well as buildings suspended in the sky, which you'll have to build towers to access. However, eventually you'll wander too deep into the store and attract something dangerous.
The store is closed.
Hi, I'm Ziggy, and I'm working on a furniture store survival game. Last year, I was just a random guy working a job I didn't like with a lifelong dream of making games, and in 6 months I made a game that let me quit my job and become a full-time indie developer. This video is about all of that and how it was the best and worst year of my life. So, I'd always made games in my spare time, but none of them gained any attention or were really even playable, so what changed? How did I go from a hobbyist to a professional in less than a year? Well, part of it is that last year my dad died from pancreatic cancer. When he was young, he'd earned a doctorate in nuclear physics, but he'd been told you make no money as a scientist, and it's difficult to build a career around research. So instead, he had a career in business consulting. He liked his work, but now faced with his own mortality, all he wanted to talk about was physics. He reconnected with his old classmates and started writing scientific papers again. And he was so focused on this work that it was almost like he was trying to make up for a lifetime not spent on what he was passionate about. I realized how similar we were. I'd always been passionate about making games, but I'd heard you made no money as a game developer, and that it was almost impossible to make it as an indie, so I never tried. But when he died, none of that mattered anymore. I didn't care what people thought was safe or easy. All I knew was I wanted to make games, so I scrapped the hobby projects I'd been working on for years. I deleted them. They weren't going to get me to where I wanted to be. So we passed March of 2020, and a week later, I started work on The Store is Closed. So, I had this idea for a game, but I didn't know where to start. What I did know was that if I wanted this to work out, I needed to market this game as soon as possible. So before writing any code, I wrote a script for a trailer. I'd end up writing a monologue from the perspective of a customer who'd been on the store a while. He'd talk about the things he'd seen, and this would let the trailer contain a simple story while showing the audience what was in the game. I leaned heavily on established tropes from trailers, like beginning the trailer with a question. Have you ever gotten lost in one of those big furniture stores? This let people very quickly understand the premise of the game, because most people have gotten lost in an IKEA, and a lot of people have wondered what they would do if they had to survive in a shop. I also set myself a goal of releasing this trailer in 6 months. So I have a script, but now I need a game. I started by creating the store itself. I've been working with Unreal Engine for a while, and since I want the game to have online co-op, Unreal Engine is actually perfect. It's pretty good at multiplayer. First, I created the layout for the store itself. I used a similar algorithm as Minecraft does to lay out its biomes, except I'm using it for the departments in the store. I first made the show floor cover the entire world as it'd be the most common department, but on top of that I added warehouses, which I made huge and spread out. I wanted them to feel like entirely unique sections of the store with their own staff and loot. I then added cafeterias, which were smaller and much more common, as the player would often need to restock on food, and I didn't want them to feel overly punished if they started running low. I then created a similar system to place points of interest in the world, such as the infinitely tall maps and the entrances to the SCP organization's underground labs. These labs are an entirely separate section of the world to explore, but I'll explain all of this in another video, so make sure to subscribe. My world is randomly generated, which saves me time as I don't have to place every single chair, sofa, and rug. However, the problem with randomness is that if everything is random, then everything can start to feel the same. To combat this, I laid the world out like a maze. This helps the store feel more man-made. It lets the floors and walls connect to each other in a logical way. I used the Unreal Engine level editor to create small sections of the store which each correspond to a maze direction and department. These combined with the layout we just made create the store. Now I have an infinite store, but it's completely empty. I commissioned 3 mutant staff members from artists I found on Fiverr. These would be the main enemies that the player would face. I wanted them to feel familiar, but also disturbing, so I gave them realistic uniforms and combined that with body horror. Each staff member starts with a sketch of an idea, which is then turned into a more fleshed out piece of concept art, which then gets turned into more detailed concept art, which is turned into the final model. These get rigged and animated, and now I have creepy store employees. I coded their AI so they'd walk around the store, and if the player gets too close, they would attack. I spawn these staff around the player as they move around, so it always seems like the store is full of these monsters. I added a day-night system where at night most of the lights would turn off with a... In the day, this music plays, but at night that's replaced with... I also gave the player a flashlight, which everything combined makes night rather creepy. I wanted nighttime to be more than just an aesthetic change, so I gave enemies a larger aggro radius and made them chase the player for longer. This made it seem like the staff became more aggressive at night. It gave the player more of a reason to be cautious and maybe even hide inside a base they'd built. On top of that, they have a totally different set of voice lines at night, so in the day they might say something like,
"We're about to close. Please make your way to the exit."
And at night they'll say,
"Customers shouldn't be in the store at night. Run away."
There's actually way too much to go into in just one video, so I also added base building, combat, and inventory, crafting, hunger, stamina, sprinting, random loot, and a bunch of other stuff. Once all this work was done, I edited the trailer and uploaded it to YouTube. I then posted it to Reddit, and the initial reception was underwhelming. It got less than 100 upvotes and barely 1,000 views on YouTube. I couldn't help but be disappointed. I sacrificed every evening and weekend for 6 months while working full-time for only 1,000 views. I didn't really understand why. I thought the game's concept was good and that the trailer was solid, but apparently people didn't care, so maybe I was wrong. I think anyone would be disappointed. However, 2 weeks later, on a hunch, I tried again, this time uploading the trailer directly onto Reddit itself. Maybe they just didn't like YouTube, and this one blew up. The trailer got tens of thousands of upvotes, 4,000 wishlists on Steam. 4,000 wishlists is crazy. This is because Steam wishlists are extremely important to game developers, as they're a bit like soft pre-orders. You see, I'd always seen advice online that if you released a game on Steam with 20,000 wishlists, you'd have a great launch, and maybe even a chance of showing up on the front page. This number had always seemed impossible, almost mythical, but with 4,000 in a couple months, I realized with 2 years of development left, hitting 20,000 might actually be possible. So this is when I decided to quit my job. Partly because I realized I was burning myself out. Working full time while dedicating every evening and weekend to develop a game was unhealthy. There's no other way to put it. I was isolating myself after having just lost a family member, when instead I should have been surrounding myself with people. So by quitting, I'd free up time to socialize and have a more normal life. However, when you make a decision like this, it's important that the people in your life, your friends and family, understand what you're doing and support you. My friends had already been suggesting I quit for weeks at this point. They understood the gaming world and opportunity that I had, but I'd moved back home with my mum due to the pandemic, and London, where I live, is incredibly expensive. So until I got funding from a publisher or released the game, I'd probably need to live with her. So more than anyone else, she needed to support the decision. The problem was that for most of my life, I was a screw-up. I didn't graduate high school, and I'd never had a stable career. For most of my life, my mum had been incredibly worried about my future. However, I'd only just started getting my shit together. I completed a computer science degree, and I was making good money as a web developer. And now that everything was going well, I was about to rip that all away. On top of that, she doesn't understand gaming. She doesn't even know who Mario is. So it would have been perfectly reasonable for her to say, if you want to quit, you'll need to move out and support yourself. But when I brought up quitting, she said she saw how hard I'd been working these past months. She didn't understand the significance of Reddit threads or wish lists, but she said she trusted me, and if this is what I wanted to do, she'd support me. That meant a lot to me. And more than just getting support from my friends, I actually needed their help. My friend Tom, who's a musician, offered to make music for the game, so he made which was incredibly generous of him. He also voiced all the staff in the game. I knew if I was going to do promotion for the game, it would be a bit weird if I was also in the game. So when you meet a member of staff, they say,
"The store is closing. Don't try to run."
That's actually my friend Tom. There's actually 1,700 different voice lines just for this greeting. Here's how that works. First I wrote a script for all the greetings, then I had Tom read all the lines.
Oi bruv, store's closed innit?
Then in editing software I duplicate the recording, add some pitch and shift delay, so it goes from
"We're about to close"
to
We're about to close.
which I do for every single voice line. I cut them up, added them to Unreal Engine, which in the blueprints for the voice line, I randomly combined part 1 and part 2 so that every time you meet a member of staff, they say something unique. There's also different voice lines for whether it's day or night, or whether they're angry or calm. I also got help from another friend, Sam, who created all the posters in the game. These do so much to add character to the store and further the weirdness of the situation. Sam did such a great job creating familiar seeming adverts and signs while evoking the sense that something is seriously wrong. So I guess my point is that when someone says they're a solo indie developer, that doesn't always mean they're entirely alone. After having quit my job, I was very happy with the fact that maybe I could reach a modest audience and even gain 20,000 wishlists over the next couple years. My original intention was to market the game through trailers and YouTube devlogs like this one. However, on a whim, I decided to give TikTok a go. Now, I'm not quite the TikTok generation, and I never even really used the app, but I thought it'd be a good way to practice my editing and voiceovers before my first YouTube devlog. So my first week on TikTok, I got maybe 1,000 views on each video, which I was happy with. But suddenly, one of my videos blew up, and I went from 1,000 views a video to over 100,000, millions even, per video. This was insane. In my first month on TikTok, I gained 20,000 new wish lists on Steam. This is a bigger reception than I'd ever dreamed of, and this meant the game had a bigger chance of being a success. So it's been a weird year. It started with the death of my dad, and then my game blew up on TikTok. So if you want to see what happens next, make sure you subscribe.